Black Sunday, Disney's opening day, and Dark Past, the origins of the term and why we need diverse voices. Disneyland's opening day was July 17th, 1955. For over 2 decades, the plan had come to fruition that changed a fruit farm in Anaheim into a multi-million-dollar theme park. Many people thought this endeavor would fail as it was very ambitious. Walt borrowed money against his life insurance and sold vacation property just to get the project going. Due to this, pressures were mounting, and Disney pushed an aggressive schedule set to open the park just a year and 1 day after construction began. Construction continued up to the start of a 90-minute live broadcast of the opening. Estimates stated that 70 million people, when the population was 165 million, had tuned in to watch. Actor and future President Ronald Reagan co hosted the event. Viewers got to take a virtual tour of the four realms of the Magic Kingdom. But behind the scenes, there was a totally different story. Peter Pan, Dumbo, and the Rocket to the Moon rides were all closed on opening day as they were inoperable. Not to mention, the rushed construction led to a number of problems. Weeds had sprouted along the canal boats of the World Ride, and Disney ordered signs to be placed depicting exotic species names in Latin. The fresh asphalt on Main Street melted as the temperatures reached 100 degrees and women's heels got stuck. A plumber's strike led to the water fountains not producing enough water and leading many to frustration. Mark Twain's riverboat was filled beyond capacity, however, with water sloshing over the deck. Not to mention nearly double the number of expected guests at the event, with 15,000 expected at the invitation only event. 28,154 had made it through counterfeit tickets or the aid of an entrepreneur that put a ladder up. There was a 7-mile backup on the Santa Ana freeway, and passengers sat in sweltering cars as kids were forced to take bathroom breaks on the side of the road and even in the parking lot of Disneyland. The park's refreshment stands and 3 restaurants ran out of food, and many upset parents and kids abandoned the lines. A lot of people were disappointed. This did nothing to stop people from visiting the park over many years, though the opening day became known as Black Sunday. Disney told the press that they would get the place operating, but it may take a month for things to go smoothly, and that ended up being the situation. In the first few weeks, the stagecoach ride was discontinued as it was top heavy and kept flipping over. A tiger and panther broke loose from the circus parade, and almost all 36 cars on the Autopia were wrecked by aggressive drivers crashing into other vehicles. Ironic, seeing as the Autopia was meant to show a utopian miniature freeway where children could learn the respectful rules of the road. Still, within 7 weeks, attendance had surpassed 1 million visitors. Soon after, the park had reached more visitors than the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone, Klein 2015, and as of their 70th anniversary, Disneyland boasts they have passed 1 billion visitors. Sabol 2025. Interlude. Now, before I continue, I'd like to try to make sense of the path we're going to take by explaining my thought process. The first thing that came to my mind when I was researching this project was some of Walt Disney's controversies and Disney's dark past, as some others have phrased it, and that more closely ties the topic at hand, so it will follow immediately. The other part of what I thought about was, what is Black Sunday? Like, where did the term originate? To my surprise, the term claims its origins in the Dust Bowl, Greenspan 2015. Following that and some short excerpts of other Black Sundays, I will talk about why we had a Dust Bowl, as well as the human margin of error and the ignorance associated with ego. Then, kind of just for fun, or maybe to make us all cry, I will talk about the cost of things during the Dust Bowl as compared to modern times. Lastly, tying to all of these things, I will talk about why we need diverse voices in legislature and really all major public sectors to attempt to lessen the human margin of error and avoid any more needless suffering. Without further ado, Disney's dark past. Number 1, Walt's alleged anti Semitism. Number 2, the use of real skeletons in movies and rides. Number 3, Frozen versus Walt Disney Frozen. Number 4, the dark origins of many of the stories, but specifically noted is The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Victor Hugo's novel. Number 5, Club 33. Number 6, America Sings, a cast member was crushed to death. Number 7, Song of the South. Period, no explanation. Number 8, abandoned parks such as Discovery Island and River Country in Florida allegedly closed due to bacterial outbreaks and safety concerns. Number 9, Disney's World War II propaganda. And number 10, Rebecca Coriam went missing in 2011 and was a crew member aboard the Disney Wonder cruise ship. The company has been accused of obstructing the investigation. 1, alleged anti Semitism. The information on this one is a little misleading because there's a lot of speculation on whether he is or isn't considered a good guy. However, it stands, He supported an anti Semitic lobbying group, the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals. Still, the Jews who worked with Disney seemed to claim he wasn't an anti Semite. Maurice Rapf said Walt wasn't anti Semitic, just a rather conservative man. Yet, a former animator claimed he heard Walt make an anti Semitic remark, and another ex staff alleged that one employee was fired because he was Jewish. It's important to note here that Hollywood historian Neil Gabler states that Disney himself was rarely involved in matters of firing, except of higher up personnel, but the original Three Little Pigs animation had portrayed the Big Bad Wolf as a stereotypical Jewish peddler. The clip was altered after complaints. However, people have no hard evidence to build this case against Walt, and so it weakens. Wyman Institute 2014. Another author says Walt was just reflecting the broadly accepted current cultural views and that he wasn't known for making vocal or explicit racist or anti Semitic remarks. Rogers 2025. So, what I'm getting at from reading these articles written about him is that many people think it is still acceptable to support groups that hate one ethnic group or otherwise support the restriction of them from participation in certain fields, and that you can make jokes about it in your art as long as it's not explicit and you remove it upon request. I take that to mean that the damage done doesn't matter as long as it's socially accepted at the current time. Don't get me wrong, I suppose I understand part of it, especially as we see so many people getting canceled in the digital age over things they didn't know would be considered rude or bad in 20 years' time. But that kind of rule doesn't apply anymore when it contributes to the actual acts of violence perpetuated among these communities. Oh, and in case a reminder is necessary, you can dislike modern Israel slash Israeli government without hating Jewish people. You can be anti Zionist without being anti Semitic. Number two, real skeletons. This one is true. Walt Disney oversaw the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and considered the faux skeletons too unconvincing. The production team got in contact with UCLA's medical center and was able to obtain real human skeletons from the anatomy department. Giamio 2015. Probably said that name wrong. My apologies. Each time a skeleton was removed for maintenance or replacement, it was buried in its country of origin properly. Paris 2021. Over time, advancements in props, sculpting, and technology progressed, and the real ones were replaced. Funnel 2023. It is noted that at least one real human skull remains in the ride as the last surviving example. Paris 2021. 3. Frozen versus Frozen. Rumor emerged after Walt's death in 1966 that he had been preserved in a cryogenic chamber. This rumor evolved due to Disney's fascination with the future and a tabloid journalist. There's no evidence to suggest that Disney was interested in or even aware of cryonics, not to mention that speculation had only occurred posthumously, which in that event, there's certainly no way for someone to defend their name. Most of the speculation came from Leonard Mosley's Disney World and Mark Elliott's Walt Disney Hollywood's Dark Prince, in which they both had suggested that Walt was fascinated with extending his life. Both books contain factual errors, undocumented assertions, and interviews with ex Disney employees who were never actually verifiably tied to the company. People point to the delay in news of his death as evidence, but instead, take a moment to imagine if no one took time to notify family first and your death was plastered everywhere. Others say his lack of funeral service was odd, but a decade before Walt died, he had allegedly said he didn't want a funeral and wanted people to remember him alive. His death certificate shows he was cremated 2 days after his death and that his estate paid $40,000 to Forest Lawn Memorial, where his plot can be found today. Harvey, 2023. While arguing with a conspiracy theorist set in their beliefs will prove little yield, it is safe to say there is little evidence to argue about the case here. OG stories such as Notre Dame. Presumably, it is well known that the original tales of many of the princess stories we see on screen today are much darker. Classics like Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Rapunzel were not originally like what they are now portrayed as, with the Brothers Grimm depicting their cultural folklore and not always happy endings. In the precursor to The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen wrote that Ariel's transformation caused her constant pains. The prince ended up marrying someone else and broke her heart. Then the witch offered that if she'd kill the prince, that she could be a mermaid again, to which she responded by throwing herself in the sea and becoming sea foam. Similarly, Frozen is based on Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, The Lion King is based on Hamlet, and the main one mentioned in the list of dark Disney history was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is based on the book of the same name by Victor Hugo. in which Quasimodo's guardian betrays Esmeralda and she is killed while Frollo laughs. Quasimodo then kills Frollo and mourns Esmeralda at her grave, eventually dying of starvation. Even Pinocchio faces a more violent plot line in his original by Carlo Collodi, Pan Macmillan 2019. Number 5, Club 33. Club 33 is Disney's secret club for those who pay exorbitant fees and follow strict rules. Members are not allowed to take photos in most of the area of the club, with Rebel Wilson earning a temporary ban for snapping a pic in one of the bathrooms. Initiation costs over $25,000, with annual dues set at $30,000 plus, which obviously ends up turning most people away, aiding exclusivity. Disney doesn't confirm the pricey fees, but insiders and media reports have circulated the numbers. It also isn't just the price tag that makes it difficult to join this club. Application is by invitation only, and you must know somebody in Disney's inner circle or existing members to be recommended. Even then, it isn't a guarantee, with waitlists reported to take 10 to 14 years to move up, and at times close entirely, leaving those who are waitlisted basically put in limbo. Supposedly, the benefits of that price are access to Club 33 lounges, VIP tours, early entry to parks, private dining, exclusive merchandise, and more. The club officially opened on June 15, 1967, as a space for VIPs and corporate sponsors. It was one of the last projects Walt had designed for the park, and though he didn't get to see it open, it fit with the mystery and magic he attempted to create. Club 33 was also special for it being the first location in Disneyland to serve alcohol. With entrances hidden, blending into the surrounding of the parks, each lounge is nearly invisible to casual visitors. In 2017, Scott and Diana Anderson were stripped of access to Club 33 after Scott was accused of public intoxication during a visit to Disneyland. This violated their strict code of conduct, and despite legal battle, Scott and Diana's membership was not reinstated, showing that regardless of how high spending the numbers are, they are not immune from the consequences of breaking the rules. Brandenburg 2024. 6. America Sings. Just 9 days after the America Sings attraction opened on July 8, 1974, an 18-year-old hostess named Deborah Gale Stone lost her life at 10:37 p.m. due to a horrific accident. A narrow channel provided movement between an inside stationary wall and the rotating wall. This narrow channel was open, and Stone had either fallen, stepped backwards, or attempted to jump from one stage to the other as the rotating wall had begun to move. Her death was pronounced at 11 p.m. when the carousel was reset for the next cycle. One audience member heard the screams and notified staff, but by the time the member and staff had got to her, she'd already died from her injuries. Her parents sued Disneyland and received a small settlement, and after her death, the attraction was closed and safety features were installed. Wikipedia contributors 2024a. 7. Song of the South. This is the movie that needs no introduction because if you know the history of Disney, you know this movie whether you've seen it yourself or not. This movie shows the widely accepted casual racism of Walt Disney's time that some other authors want us to just accept. The movie depicts a character named Uncle Remus, who is a kind elderly plantation worker teaching folk stories to the white children, presumably descendant of the people who owned Remus's ancestors. Set during the Reconstruction era, this movie shows a romanticization of slavery and shows characters as contented and subservient roles. This movie directly avoids mentioning slavery, but depicts a nostalgic view of the antebellum South, which it shows as being the good old days. To claim that the infantilizing and dehumanizing depictions of black people were a product of their era is sympathetic at best and allows these sort of narratives to continue to infiltrate every aspect of our social lives, and the discomfort or fear of retaliation, of microaggression, and sly comments. At its worst, these narratives allow the racist beliefs and violent acts against people to be widespread and easily brushed off or accepted. The crazy thing is that this movie was released during the Jim Crow era, and James Baskett, the actor who played Uncle Remus, wasn't even allowed to attend the premiere in segregated Atlanta. Tombs 2023. Number 8. Abandoned Disney Parks. One of the abandoned Disney parks was Discovery Island, which was in Bay Lake and opened on April 8, 1974. The attraction was right near Magic Kingdom and was a wildlife sanctuary designed for a peaceful nature-focused experience for guests. Basically, tropic plants, exotic birds, lots of natural views, but no rides. The idea was a walk through lush garden to observe wildlife and learn about conservation. Initially, the project was a success as families were looking for something calmer between the hustle and bustle of parks, but with the opening of Animal Kingdom in 1998, which had a more expansive wildlife and as well as other attractions, the appeal of Discovery Island lessened. Disneyland closed the park in 1999, and since then it has been overrun by nature. Disney has not attempted to do anything with it since the closure, but many urban explorers seek to sneak onto the island. River Country was Disney's first water park located at Walt Disney World and opened June 19, 1976. The concept for the water park was to use natural water from the lake rather than chlorinated pool water, which gave the park a rustic feel like an old swimming hole. The design included wooden docks, rope swings, and sand bottom lagoons. Attractions included water slides and features like a beach for sunbathing. In the 70s and 80s, River Country was a big hit, but by the late 90s, newer water parks outcompeted the attraction. In November of 2001, River Country closed its doors due to concerns about untreated lake water, and after a failed attempt to reopen, it was officially shut down in 2002, and the area was slowly overtaken by nature. In 2019, most of what remained was demolished. There were plans to build a new resort on the land, but those plans were postponed due to the pandemic. Beth, 2024. Number 9, World War II propaganda. Between the years of 1941 and 1945, Walt Disney and his company were involved in producing propaganda for the U.S. government. The idea was that the familiarity of Disney's productions would benefit in producing pro American propaganda to increase support of the war. Heading into World War II, Disney Studios was on the verge of bankruptcy, and while major profits were raked in from Snow White, Walt had a tendency to use all the revenue in making the next movie. With the release of Fantasia in 1941, this policy caused a major loss in the company because Walt spent 4 times more than his original budget on production, totaling around $2.8 million. Other movies failed to bring in better profits because the war had stopped many moviegoers from seeing his films. Walt had laid off large numbers of employees, and this raised tensions to where he had to negotiate with the labor union. In the winter of 1941, the studio was still in financial crisis, and shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. services came with requests to Walt to produce propaganda films, and on December 8th, he signed his first contract to create 20 shorts for $90,000. If it weren't for the U.S. military, it is likely that Disney would not be around today. Wikipedia Contributors 2019a. Number 10, Rebecca Corium. Liverpool student Rebecca Corium was working on the Disney Wonder cruise ship as a youth activity worker when she disappeared in March 2011. It has been over 15 years since her disappearance. Rebecca was born in Chester and graduated from Hope University with a degree in youth studies. She was last seen on March 22, 2011 at dawn. The ship was making its way into Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. She was 24 years old at the time, and her whereabouts are still unknown. Her parents, Mike and Ann, believe their daughter was murdered, thrown overboard after being sexually assaulted. Disney insists she was swept overboard by a freak wave and vanished at sea. The family settled outside of court with Disney in 2016, and in 2019, after a 9-month investigation completed by a singular policeman in the Bahamas, her disappearance was considered not suspicious. CCTV footage shows Rebecca talking on an internal Disney phone in the crew quarters on Deck 1 and visibly upset at one point. A male colleague briefly puts his arm around her while she is anxiously on the phone, and friends and family believe this footage shows her in an active state of distress due to being assaulted. The footage was from the middle of the night, and it appears Rebecca is wearing men's pajamas, which her family also took as a sign that she was desperate to leave her cabin after an attack, throwing on whatever available. Rebecca's shorts were also ripped when they were returned to her parents, adding to their belief that she was in a violent struggle just before her disappearance/death. Her parents were also surprised to see a pair of flip-flops placed neatly on top of her suitcase, but there were inconsistencies in this, as well as the shoes being a size and a half too small for Rebecca and having a different signature and cabin number written on their side. Her friends said they'd never seen her wear them, yet they were said to be left on the edge of the ship where she fell overboard. McGrath, 2026. Generally speaking, Disney parks and attractions are safe places. Considering the number of people who visit versus the number who go missing or get hurt or lose their lives, it shows that these horrific incidents aren't a specific pattern of behavior. That isn't to say that they aren't concerning instances of people whose stories deserve to be shared, simply that a broader problem of not addressing safety issues doesn't seem to be present here. Now, does this company have a questionable history? Absolutely. But to say that there's this general dark history seems a bit misleading. Walt wasn't a great guy. Most men that get that rich aren't. Regardless of whether it was acceptable to do those things or not at the time, the company did some weird stuff to make their productions better or more authentic, and they have some odd history for sure, like making propaganda. Some of the stories they brought to light came from darker places, and they gave them a family friendly twist. Some of their stories they made were blatantly racist and should be left only as an example of why that history is not acceptable. Conspiracies are fun and all, but whether you continue to support the company rests on whether you believe this is a pattern of behavior and if they've changed under different management. Where does the term Black Sunday originate? Arguably the most famous Black Sunday and presumably where the term originates is the massive dust storm that struck the Great Plains on April 14th, 1935, Greenspan 2015. The term is used in English in an idiomatic definition using, containing, or denoting expressions that are natural to a native speaker, way to describe a particularly devastating or otherwise problem filled day that falls on a Sunday. The Dust Bowl. Black Sunday 1935 was the worst storm during the Dust Bowl, and it blotted out the sun, terrifying an already struggling population. When wheat prices were on the rise amidst World War I, the homesteading population went out and plowed up native grasses that had been holding the soil in place. Land speculators claimed that rain would follow the plow and sold the lie that dust could be used as mulch to hold in moisture. At first, the yields were massive, and through the wet years, it kept on. However, as the Great Depression hit, wheat prices collapsed. Then it stopped raining, and from 1931 to the end of the decade, there was a drought. Farms went under, livestock starved, and absurd amounts of topsoil dried out and got blown into the air. The dust storms were sometimes called black blizzards. There were 14 in 1932 and 38 in 1933. Farmers kept trying to plant crops, hoping to make their mortgage payments, and actually made the environment worse in many ways. People tried to protect themselves by sealing their windows, hanging wet sheets over doorways, rubbing Vaseline in their nostrils, and wearing respiratory masks. Yet hundreds of people were killed or got sick from the constant inhalation of harmful particles. 1934 is now considered by researchers to have been the single worst drought year in North America in the last millennium. Temperatures were on the rise, exceeding 100 degrees every day for weeks across most of the southern plains. That meant that when spring came in 1935, there was much more sun baked dirt flying in the air than in previous years. The morning of April 14th was a beautiful one. After months of harsh conditions, the sky had cleared and winds died down. People came outside to do chores, and optimism was on the rise, with one Oklahoma minister stating that a few rainstorms would make the land fertile soon enough. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last, and as a cold front started moving in from Canada, temperatures fell more than 30 degrees and the wind started picking up, creating a dust cloud hundreds of miles wide and thousands of feet high heading south. The sunny day turned completely dark as the dust cloud blocked out the light, and winds picked up and blew the topsoil forward at 65 miles per hour, and the static electricity that built up helped pick more dust into the growing storm. Drivers had to stay in their cars, others bunkered down in basements, barns, shelters, under beds, or in fire stations. The storm went on for hours, and people began to panic. One woman even reported contemplating killing her baby rather than having it face Armageddon. Definition in the New Testament, the last battle between good and evil before the day of judgment, or a dramatic and catastrophic conflict typically seen as likely to destroy the world or the human race. Records aren't certain on any lives lost, though one man among the injured went blind, others couldn't stop coughing, many animals fled for their lives, and many didn't make it. Estimates later placed the amount of topsoil displaced at around 300,000 tons or 600 million pounds or 272,155,422 kilograms, some of which had flown all the way to the East Coast. The event was a defining experience for the nation and helped the term Dust Bowl become a part of many citizens' vocabulary. After the event, the government paid farmers to take marginal lands, those which the potential returns from crops are otherwise less than the cost of cultivation or access, out of production, and improved agricultural practices were implemented. Greenspan 2015. Why did we have a Dust Bowl? The Dust Bowl occurred due to a combination of several things: a severe drought hit, poor agricultural practices, being sold a lie on what the correct practices were, and the economic pressure to perform. Where I'm going to diverge on this topic, however, is more philosophy or perhaps psychology than anything else. Particularly, I believe this is tied to the human margin of error and the ignorance associated with ego. I don't think the entire populace face issues of ego regarding this happenstance. I think a small number of people struggled with ego and an inflated sense of self importance to sell desperate farmers a far fetched fib because they believed whatever the outcome was, it couldn't possibly be bad enough for them to question making a quick buck. I think a lot of it did fall onto the human margin of error and the lack of willingness to listen to the people who had lived from these lands prior to them. The only reason I don't place the entire blame on ego in correlation to not listening to the people who tended these lands is because not all the people that moved through looking for opportunity were directly tied to building the political system that we came to exist under. A lot of the people who tried to survive from farming likely had little understanding of the structure built underneath them to make their transition to living here possible. That doesn't mean blameless, nor does it mean they weren't responsible for the actions they made or the ones they condoned. All it means is that I do not believe it was ego, or at least not majorly. Compare and contrast cost of items during the Dust Bowl to now. Technically, this will be a comparison between the Great Depression and current times, but the Dust Bowl occurred during that time, so it still fits the topic. In 1930, the average gas price per gallon was 10 cents, worth $1.88 today. What is 10 cents in 1930 worth today, 2016? Prices are currently set at around $2.99 on average per gallon, with most states seeing higher prices. AAA 2024, I think mine is around $3.40, with prices continuing to rise due to ongoing conflict. During the Great Depression, the average cost of living was $4,000 a year, worth $75,361.39 today. What is $4,000 in 1930 worth today, 2016? Though the average income was $1,125 a year, the average cost of living in the US in 2025 to 2026 is said to be about $65,000 to $75,000 per year, while View 2026, with a median income at $62,088. Fidelity Smart Money 2024. Keep in mind here that median is the middle, so half of US citizens make more and half make less. That is not to mention taxes. In 1933, the unemployment rate was 24.9 to 25.6%, Pettinger 2020. And in 2020, the unemployment rate reached 14.8%. As of March 2026, the unemployment rate is listed at 4.3% total, though keep in mind the number adjusts based on race and gender. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics 2025, so perhaps we aren't facing exactly the level of debilitating financial crisis like the Great Depression. The fact stands that at least half, presumably more, considering the middle income is not even set at the cost of living, of the United States citizens aren't making enough just to get by. Outside of the comparison, this is still concerning. Obviously, statistics can be skewed by outliers or for any number of reasons, but the resounding, definition unmistakable, emphatic sentiment that I hear is how hard it is to get ahead. Quotations. The reason I put ahead in quotations is because it's sarcastic or misleading. People aren't trying to get ahead, they are trying to not be literally financially crippled by one hospital visit. People are trying to afford groceries, housing, and transportation to work, and sometimes those alone are too much. Two incomes do not guarantee appropriate housing for a family anymore, and the list goes on. So yeah, maybe the numbers and statistics show we aren't facing as serious of a financial crisis, but we are facing one. Other Black Sundays. There are a lot of other days that were called Black Sunday, but the ones I will briefly talk about are 1943 Operation Tidal Wave air raid losses, 1963 Pan Am Flight 214 crash, 1967 Iowa-Minnesota tornado outbreak, and 2005 FDNY's deadliest day since 9/11, when multiple firefighters died in separate calls. 1943, the Ploesti raid on August 1st, 1943 marked the second highest loss in a single operation by the United States Army Force. The original plan was to send B-24 bombers on a low-altitude mission concentrated on refineries in the Romanian city of Ploesti. Among the top oil producers in Europe, 30% of the Axis powers fuel supply was coming from these refineries. A total of 1,751 airmen and 178 B-24 bombers were to fly in. The original aim was 154 bombers. It was meant to last one day and was the highest number of heavy bombers sent at the time. The USAAF underestimated the Luftwaffe's defenses, and it was to their misfortune. By the end of the attack, only around 88 B-24s returned, mostly in poor condition. There was an overall loss of 500 Americans, with 310 killed or missing, 108 taken by the Axis, 78 interned in Turkey, and 4 taken in by Joseph Tito Braz's partisans in Yugoslavia. Not considered a success by money, the target aim of destroying 90% of Axis oil only destroyed around 40%. Wikipedia contributors 2022. 1963, the Pan Am crash of Flight 214 occurred on December 8, 1963 in Elkton, Maryland, due to an in-flight explosion and breakup that was caused by lightning. There were 81 people aboard the flight, with 73 passengers and 8 crew members. Sadly, none of them survived. The exact manner in which the ignition happened was not determined, but the accident raised awareness and led to new regulations regarding safety improvements. Wikipedia contributors 2023. The rest of the details surrounding this case are quite sad, and it seems rude to include them. In short, this Black Sunday was a terrible accident, and though the pilots tried to do what was safest, the aircraft simply wasn't prepared for the events that occurred. 1967, the residents of southern Minnesota and northern and eastern Iowa have long considered the events that took place on April 30th, 1967, Black Sunday. A series of supercell thunderstorms had spawned, and several violent tornadoes came from it. Between 6 to 7 p.m., portions of the Albert Fort Leah and Waseca City were destroyed, while other cities barely escaped ruin. 13 residents in Minnesota passed, and 90 more people across both states were injured. Names of those lost were Mr. and Miss Elmer Manuel, Herman Naring, Miss Michael Hassing, Harlan Hollenshaw, Mr. and Miss Merton Bickford, Mr. and Miss John Ripple, Mr. and Miss George Willock, and Mr. and Miss Art Rue, or Rux. Of the 9 tornadoes that spawned, 3 were F4s, 2 F3, 3 F2, and 1 F1. The biggest width observed of the tornadoes was 500 yards, National Weather Service 2005. A total of 38 tornadoes were confirmed, with the weather event lasting 2 days, 2 hours, and 55 minutes. The total confirmed tornadoes by Fujita rating were 1 F0, 8 F1, 21 F2, 4 F3, and 4 F4s. Wikipedia Contributors 2019b. 2005, on January 23, 2005, 2 serious fires broke out, killing 3 New York City Fire Department firefighters and seriously injuring 4 others. This was the deadliest day for the FDNY since the World Trade Center attack, and the first time since 1918 that firefighters had died at 2 separate incidents on the same day. One fire occurred in the Bronx at 236 East 178th Street off Grand Concourse and may have been caused by an extension cord to a portable heater setting a mattress on fire. The alarm call was made at 8:59 a.m. just one day after a blizzard in which the snow slowed the fire engines from reaching the address. The closest fire hydrant was frozen, and several hoses were either frozen or cracked. The apartment complex had illegally subdivided rooms using drywall partitions, which led those trying to escape with nowhere to go. The Brooklyn fire that same day was in the basement of a 2-family household on Jerome Street. People attending a birthday party reported smelling smoke, and when the firefighters who were investigating withdrew from the basement when the heat got too intense, one man didn't make it out. Richard T. Sclafani was found unconscious on the stairs. Family, friends, and colleagues gather on a January Saturday morning at 11 a.m. for a memorial at Brooklyn Ladder 103 and Bronx Engine 46 Ladder 27 to pay homage annually. Wikipedia Contributors 2022b. Events like these stand out for the immense tragedy they possess. Yet despite it all, these communities come back stronger when faced with not knowing where to go afterwards. Sure, you could call it trauma bonding, but that takes away the special aspect that is humanity. Finding comfort in sharing the same struggles or losses is something so innately human that I cannot push hate towards it. Now, that doesn't mean people won't ever come to a point where that trauma bond can form dependency and stop people from moving forward, but that's a whole different story that doesn't fit into the point that I'm making here. Why we need diverse voices. In legislature, but really in all major public sectors, we need diverse voices to attempt to lessen the human margin of error to avoid any more needless suffering. I've attempted to explain this before, but I admittedly don't always do the best job of it, so I will try to break it down in a million different ways until it makes sense to everyone. The reason we need people to be different is because they will think differently. If people think differently than each other, then they can provide feedback and views from angles that we might not consider on our own. For example, do I know how to run a city? No, but I do know how to mend clothes. I know someone that knows how to grow crops and raise livestock. I know people that know how to teach, etc., etc. Together, those skills and those minds can do things that one person alone is not capable of doing. Already, we make the world run. Now imagine if everyone chose to stop, even just for one day. What sort of message would that send? If we put as much thought into every plan as we put effort into avoiding conflict in our personal lives, we would negate the entire need or basis of conflict. Maybe I'm a glass half full kind of guy and my ideas don't make sense, but the entire purpose of making those ideas known is to find the guys that know the other skills that make ideas like that turn into real movement. Anywho, I think I'm starting to lose the plot a little with this writing, so I should start wrapping it up. As always, thank you for being here. The fact that we're trying to learn something new is a big step. I still believe we can make the world better, and I've seen it happening in real time, i.e., the animals we've brought back from the brink of extinction. Go view some Hope Corps and get back in the swing of things. We have our own world to create. Your mind is more powerful than you could possibly begin to imagine. Thank you for being a part of this world. If you are a fan of investigative journalism and philosophy, subscribe for free today. If you would like to further support my efforts, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which will be down below, which helps me cover research materials, i.e. purchasing text, as well as my time and effort in development. Along with that, it supports my real-life effort in making education free and widespread. I thank you for your support, no matter the form. If you would like to read this writing or read any of the articles in relation to my references, my Substack and Patreon links will take you directly to that writing, or you can click there and look at all my other writings. Other than that, I just thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.